Thank you for tuning in to CNN Student News. I'm Lisa Tapa, your student news anchor.
And I'm Daniela Padilla, your co-news anchor.
On today's top story, we are going to focus on the 9/11 Victim Compensation Act, which began in 2001. As we all remember the September 11 terrorist attacks, many lives were taken from us. This fund was created to compensate any individual who suffered any injuries or died in the attack. In other words, families were able to receive compensation if they lost a relative due to the attack.
Although this seems like a good thing to do for the families, recently there has been a huge debate whether they should receive money or not. We wanted to tackle this debate ourselves and give you more information about each side so you can be well informed.
Which is why in our studio today, I will be interviewing 29-year-old Jessica Warren, who strongly supports the compensation fund.
And I will be interviewing 31-year-old Eva Miller, who strongly opposes of the fund. We have set out 2 interviews to understand each of their points and values. So now we'll take you into the studio with reporter Tapia and Eva Miller.
Thank you, Daniela, and thank you for being here with me today. Please tell us a little about yourself.
Well, my name is Eva Miller, and I am 31 years old. My husband and I own a small real estate company in New York City. We currently do not have any children, and we moved to New York City because my husband wanted to have his own company here.
Great, that's impressive. Now let's get right into our top story, which is the 9/11 Compensation Fund. Ms. Miller is here today to give us her side of the story. So, Ms. Miller, why do you oppose of the 9/11 Compensation Fund?
I oppose of the 9/11 Compensation Fund because I believe that it is not part of our heritage to be insurance for the people. I believe it as like good things happen to bad people every day, so it's not our part to give them any money. And I believe I am a taxpayer for something like this, and my money shouldn't go to this because I recently moved to New York City and there wasn't any sort of compensation for any other terrorist attacks, and there hasn't been any compensation for any natural disasters, so that is why I believe that we should not continue any further funding.
Okay, I see where you're coming from, but this is an attack that affected millions. Congress wanted to do something to help out these struggling families. I know it was a lot to make taxpayers the compensation insurers, but don't you think it was the least that they could have done?
I also understand that, but I don't believe that it was right for us to become insurance. I wasn't in New York City when the attacks actually happened. My husband and I moved 5 years later. I realized that we were paying more taxes because of the compensation fund. It has been 15 years since the attack, so I don't think it's not valid for to keep on paying for the fund.
Okay, I see. So if we shouldn't have the fund, then what should we do for these families?
I believe we should organize another fund for people who actually want to help victims and get real money from people and not forced taxpayers.
Okay, thank you for your response. Any last words or comments to add?
No, that's everything. These are my beliefs, and I'm pretty sure other people feel the same way as I do. So thank you for having me.
Okay, thanks once again, and we're going to go back to the studio.
What an interesting interview that was.
It really was interesting to hear Ava's opinion in this debate, but now we have to hear the other side of this huge debate, which is why in the other studio we have Jessica Warren with reporter Padilla.
Thank you, Lizette, and thank you, Mrs. Warren, for being here with me today. Why don't you begin with telling me a little bit about yourself?
Well, my name is Jessica, and I'm 29 years old. My father died in the September 11 terrorist attacks, and he was a security guard for Cantor Fitzgerald.
What can you tell us about your father?
All I can say about my father was that he had a fun and amazing spirit, and then when he passed away, that faded away from me.
I'm so sorry for your loss, Mrs. Warren.
Thank you, and you can call me Jessica.
Well, then let's get on with the topic today. Jessica here agrees with the fund for the 9/11 compensation, and her mother signed up for it after thinking about it for a really long time. Now, Jessica, why do you agree with this fund?
Well, at first I didn't want anything to do with the fund because I didn't think it was right. It wouldn't compensate for the loss of my father. But after a long talk and the long struggle with my mother, she decided to sign up for the fund after having a long conversation with my grandmother, who convinced her that the fund would help us after the bills were piling up. I didn't pay any attention to what was going on until my mother began to change and she noticed that the fund would help us out better. Money was coming from somewhere and I didn't understand where it was coming from until my mother told me about the 9/11 compensation fund. After that, we had a long talk about what it was and how it was going to help us out during these tough times. Even though we refused to use it at first, my mother thought it was a great thing. It was something that would help us out in the long run. That is why I strongly agree with it. It helped my mother and I during a tough time, and I know it will help others too.
What a touching story, Jessica.
Thank you very much.
Now, how do you feel about the debate regarding the fund? Has it affected the way you see, or has it been difficult to understand why people are against it?
Well, at first it angered me to know that people refused of the fund, and I just didn't understand why people didn't want to have the fund when it was helping people. When I first heard of all the commotion, I still didn't understand, but then once I heard each side of the debate, I began to understand why people, like strangers, didn't want to pay for taxes that would go to other strangers. So it was a hassle for taxpayers to pay more taxes for the fund that happened 15 years ago. And then at some point I was stuck between two sides, but right now I can say that I'm fully I agree with the fund because it has helped more families, and even though it won't bring the loved one back, it will help them in a struggling time.
Wow, what an inspiring message you just delivered to us. I have another question for you.
Okay, go ahead.
If you met someone that opposes the fund, what would you like to say to them?
I would first start off by saying thank you. They wouldn't understand why, but I would say thank you because they've helped families that they don't know, even if they don't know that they're helping them. It's the tax money is going to those families and helping them in any support that they need. And I would also say if people are angered because of the 9/11 compensation fund, I would also like to say sorry, because even though it's not their fault that the tax happened, they've had to pay the taxes, and it's also a hard situation on families like us because fathers and mothers and civilians were taken away from us in an inhumane way. And I would just like to say that this fund is really helping those struggling families because of the loss of a loved one.
Thank you so much for that mature response. I really admire your strength and humanity.
Thank you so much.
My last question for you is, what advice would you give to families that are in a similar situation as you are and you're currently still in?
I would just like to say that this situation is not easy, and it's not easy to face, but when you have the 9/11 compensation fund to back you up, it will make things easier. This unique fund was designed for families that lost someone, and I can testify to that statement. I understand that it won't compensate for the loss of a loved one, but it surely will be a great resource in a time of need.
Again, thank you for that. And thank you once again for being here with us to give us your opinion on this very important topic. We greatly appreciate it.
No, thank you for having me today. I really enjoy having this talk with you.
You're welcome. Now, back to the studio.
What an amazing interview that was.
Yeah, it really was interesting to hear Jessica's story and opinion on this debate.
Well, we hope everyone had an opportunity to learn a little about each side of this argument through these small interviews.
Not only can these interviews help you choose a side to agree with, but you can also do some research on your own to finally make your own decision.
Again, thank you for joining CNN Student News. I'm Lizette Tapia.
And I'm Daniela Padilla, and have a great day! We have set out these two interviews to understand each of their points and values. So now we get into the studio with reporter Tapia and Eva Miller.
Thank you, and can you please just call me Jessica?
Oh, that sounds weird.
That sounds like you're so rude.
Please, you can call me Jessica.
Thank you, Lizette, for